Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Here to talk to you all on TikTok and YouTube and everywhere else over there about the latest from Ukraine. Can you hear at all over on TikTok? Hold on, I'll turn my volume up a little. Oh, that would be because the microphone's not in front of my face. Can you hear me now? There we go. Yeah, it's been a while that I've sort of forgotten to put the microphone actually in front of me, but sometimes that happens. All right, I'll turn it up a little bit. I can only get so loud because then it gets too loud over on YouTube. Anyway, welcome, folks. Thank you for joining me as always. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report, my daily show Monday to Friday, where we talk about the latest from the war in Ukraine. And as always, there's a lot of news today. God, I think we've only had like a couple days where I was worried there wasn't enough news, and like we're in the 8th month now. And we've got more than enough news. If you guys, thank you for the gift already, Louis on TikTok. If you guys would maybe introduce yourselves, just say where you're from, because we always get new people every day. So I think that's kind of neat. And I will do my introductions and then we'll get rolling. Okay. So the way this works is I do about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Maybe today's 25 minutes of news. Thank you for the duck, baby shoe. And then we do question and answer. On TikTok, submit your questions via the Q&A function in my profile. Go to the profile, you'll see Q&A. You can submit them now or later. It doesn't really matter. I'll get to them during the Q&A time. And on YouTube and everywhere else, you can obviously use the comment box at the bottom. What I do sort of as a favor for folks is, or as a thank you, I should say, folks who are my subscribers on TikTok, you know who you are with the little SNN, the paid subscribers, I will go to your questions first when we get to question period. And on YouTube, etc., I will do the super chat questions first. Thank you for all the Affleck ducks. On YouTube, I will do the questions, super chat questions first for you guys. Let me see. That's about it. Actually, last little thing to tell you. So please do follow me on TikTok and everywhere else. It's very helpful. The gifts on TikTok are extremely helpful. I would say that has been really my main source of income in doing all of this, has been the gifts you guys are providing. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And I will always try to do a shout out if I see you doing the gift. Final point, this coming Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US, thank you for the lights there on TikTok. At 6 p.m. Eastern Time, US, I will be having a good old friend of mine, Cliff Schechter, on, who is an election polling expert with pollster. And Cliff will be talking to us about the latest polls regarding the elections coming up in the US on November 8th. That's in only a week and a half from now. These are congressional elections, and they are state and local elections, so governor and other elections like that. Cliff knows the polls inside out. He's going to summarize everything for us and then take your questions. Trust me, it's going to be really interesting. All right, guys, let's start in with the news from Ukraine. So I want to start with thank you, El, for that. I want to start with a quick funny story that, I kid you not, is not a joke. This is a real story. But a Russian comedy network, so a television network devoted to comedy, so kind of like Russia's Comedy Central, let's call them that. Thank you, Bob, for the duck. Russia's Comedy Central has shut down all of its comedy shows because most of Russia's comedians have left the country. I mean, how's that for wild? The comedians have all left. Now, mind you, if you think of what comedians do, I don't really blame them, right? It's not terribly safe. Thank you for the origami and for the hat there, Dee, and Nancy for the origami. So let's get into the news itself. So I titled today's broadcast, Putin Flinched, Kinda, because he did kinda. Kind of weird today what's going on. Now, for the last week or so, well, actually, oh my God, you know what? Somebody just mentioned Kanye. Can I do a quick tangent and tell you the latest on Kanye? I literally just saw this 2 seconds ago on the TV before we started, and I was going to start just as an amuse-bouche, as they say in French restaurants, a way to amuse the tongue, amuse the mouth a little bit to get you warmed up. So let me just tell you the Kanye story really quick, and then we'll go back to Ukraine. So the latest news from CNN is Kanye West, according to multiple sources, Kanye West back in 2018, up until the last moment, was going to name his album Hitler. And I shouldn't even use the word because I don't want the bad, TikTok things and everything else to go crazy. So I won't use the word again, but wanted to name it after that German leader from World War II. And they kept trying to convince him it was a bad idea until the very end he was going to do it. And then finally he caved. The second thing was, someone apparently who used to work with Kanye in the office and apparently has a settlement agreement with Kanye that CNN reviewed the actual settlement agreement, said that Kanye made it a hostile workplace because he kept praising Hitler. He was effusive in his praise of Hitler. Oh God, I keep using the word. Sorry, I don't want to use that word and get into trouble with the moderators on TikTok or YouTube. Crazy stuff. Okay. Anyway, back to Ukraine. I just thought I would tell you that because it literally was the breaking news, and I was going, "Oh my God." Yeah, evil mustache man. That's a good idea. Alex said, "We'll call him evil mustache man if he ever has to come up again." So anyway, so Putin kind of flinched today on nuclear weapons to a degree. Now, you know that I don't want to say I've been worried. I've not been worried about Putin using nuclear weapons because I am somebody who believes that Putin is bluffing. That honestly, the Russians are losing in Ukraine. It doesn't mean the war's over tomorrow, but we know that the Russians control about 18% of Ukraine's territory. So it's not like the Russians don't have an advantage there, right? I mean, they control the territory, but the Ukrainians are making advances. Once winter hits full blown in about 4 weeks, a lot of the experts expect things to sort of freeze in place, no pun intended, for a while. And then come spring, it opens up again. So nonetheless, the Ukrainians are making advances. Everybody sort of, well, not everybody. I think you would be hard pressed to find anybody serious who's objective who would say that, oh yeah, Russia's got this. Russia's got this, right? No, Russia is in trouble. Ukraine still needs a lot of work to win this, but Russia's not winning this. So we've been concerned about Putin's threats about nuclear war and his staff threatening about nuclear war. I've been saying from the beginning that I think Putin and his people keep talking about nukes and keep threatening nukes and dirty bombs and all this kind of crazy stuff because they're trying to freak us out because there's no other way for them to win. Right? I mean, there's just no other way for them to win other than trying to convince Biden and Macron in France and Schultz in Germany and all of our people and the liberal Democrats in the House who wrote that crazy letter the other day. They need to convince all of us that, oh my God, we're all going to die. Right? And then we just put the pressure on our leaders. We put the pressure on our members of Congress and our presidents and say, you've got to stop Ukraine. Right? So that's what Putin's doing here. Having said that, it is not, even I will say, who thinks Putin's bluffing, it is not a very safe thing for the leader of a nuclear country to keep talking about basically starting a nuclear war, right? It is not safe because that's how accidents happen. That's how, the Poles in Poland's right on the border there, right? With all the fighting going on. That's how Poland, for example, sees a plane coming from Russia that goes across Ukraine or that goes across Belarus and starts entering Polish airspace. And what if it's a bomber? What if it's a nuclear bomber, right? And what if it's a mistake, but they see a nuclear bomber? Do they shoot it out of the sky? Probably, right? I mean, you can start to have accidents happen that can spin out of control. That's why it's not safe for Putin to be making these kind of threats. Having said that, Putin today was speaking at a think tank in Russia. And let me just read you what he said, okay? Putin said, among other things, that he never talked about using nuclear weapons. He doesn't know why anybody said that. First of all, yes, he did. Putin himself, he used a lot of euphemisms. He talked about, we will use every weapon available to us to protect Mother Russia and this kind of garbage, right? Clearly insinuating that they would use nukes. His staff and his aides and the military have absolutely suggested that they might use nukes. And the Russian state media that is controlled by Putin have repeatedly waxed lyrical. I mean, these guys were having, they were making love to the concept that Russia was going to nuke the West. They were talking about, oh, we will attack Berlin and we will attack Paris and we will attack London. And they were showing on a map how easy it would be to attack all of these cities. So the Russians, and mind you, it's a dictatorship. So what you see on Russian TV is coming from Putin. We know they were that they were pushing it. Well, in any case, he says, I never talked about using nuclear weapons. Then he goes on to say, it wouldn't make sense politically or militarily for Russia to use nuclear weapons. Now, that's a good thing to say. It is very true. I mean, he is correct. Militarily, it doesn't help him to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Everything he wants to do, he could do with conventional weapons. The experts are saying the nuclear weapons don't really help him achieve anything faster, and they cause more problems politically, as Putin's saying, because you would force allies like India and maybe even China to turn against Russia. You would force the developing world that's been very supportive of Russia to turn against, or at least has been in the middle, kind of be Africa, kind of being quiet, right? Militarily, actually, it would be a problem. It would be a negative, not just not a positive. A negative for Russia, because militarily, if Russia used nukes in Ukraine, thank you for the crown there, Firestorm, it would force NATO to enter the war. And the Russians are having a very hard time beating the Ukrainians, as we've all seen. Imagine what it would be like if NATO entered the war, if America entered, if Germany, if France, if Norway, the Baltic states, Poland's got a good military too, right? If all of these guys entered the war, Russia would be toast in terms of a conventional war. A nuclear war, nobody wins. Nuclear war, we wouldn't win, Russia wouldn't win. I'll tell you that right now, right? So I'm not going to, thank you, Hector, for that. I'm not going to make any lies about that. No one wins a nuclear war. But Putin knows no one wins a nuclear war. So again, I don't think there was any chance of him pushing that. But so he's right about this. He's right that it makes no sense politically or militarily, is what Putin said today. That's great. But then he went on to repeat the claim that he believed Ukraine was getting ready to use a dirty bomb. Now, just to tell you again what a dirty bomb is, because some of you may not have been on yesterday's show, a dirty bomb is simply a conventional bomb. Thank you for that on TikTok. It is a regular bomb, okay? I mean, just a bomb made from plastic explosives, made from TNT even, right? It's just a regular bomb. But a dirty bomb has some uranium, I think. It's some kind of radioactive material. You could take it from a nuclear plant, wherever, radioactive material placed on top of the bomb. And the goal is for when the bomb explodes, it basically throws the nuclear material all over the place and causes a lot of damage. Thank you, Kilo, for the hat. It causes a lot of damage. It causes a lot of radiation to spread. That radiation basically scares the hell out of people, right? Because let's face it, and I've told these guys this before, imagine if wherever you live and you heard that downtown a bomb went off, downtown in your city, a bomb went off that had nuclear material in it. You'd be like, that's a nuclear bomb. And even if it's not a nuclear bomb, that's a nuclear bomb, right? I'd be freaking out. Dirty bombs are really in many ways meant to be a terror weapon. It's meant to scare the hell out of you. So what Putin did do is he repeated his claim that he was worried about Ukraine, planning to use a dirty bomb. And the reason that worries people is because the Russians have a habit of doing two things with their foreign policy. One, they lie a lot, which is why I still think Putin denying this, thank you, Sig Sauer. I still think Putin denying all of this doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. Because when Putin says we're not going to use nuclear weapons, all you have to do is think back to the beginning of the war in Ukraine back in February of 2022, this year, when up until the very end, right before they invaded, the Russians said, we're not going to invade. It's a lie. NATO's lying. Biden's crazy. He's old. And then what happens? The Russians invaded, right? So the fact that Putin is saying we're not going to use nukes should not necessarily make you think he's not going to use nukes. But it is certainly, if we have a choice between Putin saying, I'm going to use nukes, and Putin saying, I'm not going to use nukes, I'd rather have him say, I'm not going to, because at least it gets the tensions down a little bit, which I think is a good thing, right? So that's good. But the dirty nuke thing, the problem with the dirty nukes, though, it takes us back into the danger zone, because no one thinks that Ukraine is going to be using a dirty bomb. No one thinks that. The Russians claim it, but nobody thinks it. What they do think is that the Russians keep accusing Ukraine of using a dirty bomb. Thank you, Benito, for that, by the way, of using a dirty bomb, because the Russians are planning to do it. And that the Russians want to use this dirty bomb, which would be a conventional bomb with nuclear material, cause radiation damage. And the Russians would say, the Ukrainians did it. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. The Ukrainians did it, right? We've been warning you for weeks that Ukraine was going to set off a dirty bomb. And look, someone has. It must be the Ukrainians. The reason they would do it, and this is the scary part, the reason they would do it is so that Russia then would have an excuse to respond to Ukraine and use a nuclear bomb in response, because Russia would say, well, Ukraine used a nuclear, I don't even know what word to use here, nuclear type bomb, a dirty bomb, to go after our troops, for example. They killed Russian citizens. We must now use a nuke to go after Ukraine. So that's the concern that a lot of folks in the West have, even though I think it's low down on the possible scale. It still is a concern, because otherwise, why does Putin keep talking about the dirty bomb? So bottom line here is he did kind of flinch today, and then he kind of backtracked, which is not a good thing. Putin then went on to say, he talked as well. Actually, I'll reset again. I always forget to reset for anybody who's new, especially on TikTok. I know a lot of folks come in new every couple minutes. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. I come to you guys live every day, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern on TikTok, and also on a number of other services over on my laptop over there, which is why you guys will see me look back and forth. And we talk about Ukraine, and I summarize the news of the last 24 hours that I think is important. I try to tell you why it matters, and then we do questions and answers. So we're doing the summary right now. Please follow me on TikTok and follow me elsewhere. Thank you for the gift. And if you guys can provide the gifts, I appreciate it. The super chat questions, the super stickers, and the gifts on TikTok, because I am doing this full time, and it really helps me out when you guys support me. So thank you for that. All right. Putin then went on in his talk today, and this is the part where, again, I think he's trying to scare everybody. He claimed that the West is blinded by colonialism and, quote, tries to contain the development of other civilizations. Now, remember, he's talking about what the West is doing in Ukraine to stop him from literally exterminating an entire people, from committing genocide of a smaller country on his border. Okay? He calls stopping him from committing genocide against small countries our colonialism, and us trying to we got the cool whale coming. Thank you, James. That was very nice of you. Sorry, we got the cool whale on TikTok again, which I wish at some point somebody could get. Actually, I can get that. I'll try to get I've got the recording on TikTok of that, just to show people what it is, so that you guys over on YouTube and everywhere can see, because the whale's so freaking cool. The whale is just so freaking cool. James, that was amazing. Thank you. And very generous of you, by the way, as well. So he goes on. Putin added, however, that sooner or later, the West will have to start talking about our common future. Now, that one really killed me, okay? Putin is lecturing us today that we're not doing enough to bring Russia into, the family of nations, to think about our future together, as if like we're getting married or something. He's out of his mind. He's out of his mind. No, excuse me. He's not out of his mind. I often tell people this on Twitter, because I'm on Twitter a lot, doing a lot of social media work there as well. And I often tell people, don't assume someone's crazy or stupid when they could simply be lying. And I think that's what we get a lot with Russia, with the Russian government officials, and what they say about Ukraine and international relations a lot. They're not stupid. They're liars. And they're in it to basically either play games with people here in the West to try to scare our leaders, or to try to create disinformation and misinformation for people like you and me, especially to convince people, Tucker Carlson on Fox News, people who are basically pro-Putin and anti-Ukraine, trying to give him some fuel and stuff. But in any case, so that, yes, our common future, because, that just cracks me up. So finally, Putin's final point. We are facing one of the most dangerous and unpredictable decades since the Second World War. Putin said, adding that the world order imposed after the Soviet Union's collapse is coming to an end. So what he's saying there is, first of all, yes, it is true that it is not, first of all, since it is not one of the most dangerous decades. What is this? Most dangerous and unpredictable decades? That's not even true. We've been in this war. Putin's been attacking Ukraine now for 8 months. Okay. This is not a dangerous decade. It's a dangerous 8 months. It is not the most dangerous since World War II. That was back to 1945. It is the most dangerous since the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. But that's because we didn't really have very dangerous international periods of, we didn't have anybody talking about nuclear war for the last 30 years since the Soviet Union broke up, right? So, yes, it's very dangerous now compared to 30 years ago, but something else cool. Oh, wow. Sorry, very cool. Okay, big drama. I know that was big what you just bought there. Thank you. Because I remember seeing that and thinking, I can't even ask anybody to do that. Sorry, folks. This was an incredibly generous gift somebody just did on TikTok. I mean, I thank people in general, but when it's something that big, I've got to stop and let folks know. Thank you so much, because I remember seeing that on the gift list and thinking, yeah, right. Thank you so much for that. And also thank you, because I also think it almost gives a little bit of a show for people, which is kind of neat too, because they get to sort of see the gifts. Anyway, I got like chills telling you this. Thank you for that. That's very sweet of you. So, I don't know. Again, there's a lot of bravado going on for someone who's losing. I will put it that way. A lot of bravado for somebody who's losing. And again, probably what's going on here is that Putin is trying to shore up his domestic audience. People in Russia are starting to freak out. They're starting to freak out. I mean, understandably, right? I mean, the war up until now was somebody else's kid dying. Thank you, Kim, for that. You've got mail. The war was somebody else's kids dying. Then a lot of Russian soldiers have now been killed or injured. Somewhere on the order of, I think the numbers are like 60 to 90,000 have been killed or injured. In terms of, thank you, Sig, for that. In terms of killed, I believe the conservative number is 25 to 30,000, right? Right. I'm sorry. Right. Cuban. Actually, good point. Sorry, John. I did sort of forget to mention this. Thank you, Ray. People are buying very cool gifts on TikTok tonight. Thank you, guys. True. John, a quick little aside, but John Hoover was mentioning the Cuban Missile Crisis. Exactly. This is nothing like the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was the most dangerous thing to happen since World War II. And we also had some other things. Thank you, Sig. We also had some other things pop up in the meantime. During the Reagan era, there was kind of a scary little glitch that we didn't find out until later, of sort of there was some concern that a nuke was going off and it wasn't. I mean, really scary stuff. In any case, just crazy stuff from him. Hang on. We got a question here from Rachel. Let me see. One sec here. Yeah, lots of cool gifts tonight. You guys are really amazing. Rachel Hynet. Seen reports of Russia knowingly sending, I did see this today, of knowingly sending HIV positive and hepatitis positive soldiers to the front lines. If true, is this not a type of biowarfare, giving the proclivity for the type? Now, this is very interesting. And I actually saw this on CNN this afternoon as well. Thank you, Jesse, for the hat. So Prigozhin, or whatever his name is, the guy that finances and runs the Wagner Group, right? These murderous Russian mercenaries. Thank you, Patty. And topical for Halloween. Runs these, thank you, Louis, these mercenary groups. He admitted that they are sending troops who are HIV positive and have hepatitis to the front lines. Now, he said, we don't have any restrictions on these kind of things, going to fight. And I was watching Frederick Pleitgen on CNN say, they're sending people seriously ill to the front line, after he mentioned HIV. And it kind of bothered me, because I was like, just because somebody has HIV, especially nowadays, doesn't mean they're seriously ill. Most people, if they're on their medicine, almost everybody with HIV, they're undetectable. Their virus levels are so low, they're totally healthy. Okay. Thank you, Inspired, for that. They're totally healthy. Hepatitis, I don't know as much about. I just know because a lot of activism I've done over the years on HIV/AIDS issues and things like that, right? So I'm up on that. Somebody else mentioned, but this is Russia, right? These are folks who aren't getting sleeping bags. They're soldiers who aren't getting food. They aren't getting ammunition. So it's probably a good bet that they're not getting their daily dose of HIV medicines as well. Right? So you probably are sending somebody who, unfortunately, their illness is out of control. Hepatitis, I don't know. I see Wei Ray Cray saying that it is highly contagious. I don't know if they're sending it as a bioweapon. I think what is more likely, thank you, Big Hawk, because let's face it, these guys are a bigger threat to their own people, right? Thank you, Big Drama. The funniest part is you guys are sending me all the things I've never seen before. Thank you. Sorry, you're sending all the gifts I've never seen. Thank you. This is like crazy gift today. Thank you, guys. Um, Hepatitis is very contagious. Well, who are you going to give it to? You're going to give it to the fellow soldiers on the front line. Thank you, Madeline. Right? You know, who are the guys? The guys that you're sharing your dishes with or whatever. I mean, I don't remember. I'm not going to sort of get into the details of hepatitis because, again, I can't remember which one's which. So which one, if hepatitis is the one that you can get, you know, I don't know how one spreads these things. But nonetheless, what I wonder about is, so you're posing more of a risk to your fellow soldiers. And also, frankly, if you're fooling around too, soldiers probably fooling around with other soldiers before they're fooling around with anybody. If they're there for 8 months, right? So you're putting your own troops at risk. I suspect what's going on in terms of Russia sending soldiers with HIV, soldiers with hepatitis to the front is they're desperate. They're desperate. It's the same reason I was going to tell you in a second. I've got a new story about the Russians sending more convicts to the front. They've been going to prisons from the beginning. Thanks again for that, Rachel. They've been going to prisons from the beginning, and they have been telling convicts that if you fight for us, well, initially they said after 6 months. Now I don't know what it is, but after 6 months, we will expunge your prison record and you'll be a free man, right? So that was because they were desperate to get people, and they're still desperate. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're saying, you know what? I don't care how sick they are. Get them out there. We need bodies, especially because, let's face it, the Russian military is not known for caring about its troops. Right? These are guys who, when their soldiers die, they leave their body, or they have been, maybe not always, but they've been leaving a lot of their soldiers on the battlefield, which is not something that Western military does. I don't think it's something the Ukrainian military does. It's something the Russian military does a lot. So they may not simply care that they're putting their troops at risk. Anyway, another story that I thought was worth mentioning, just because I didn't, in case you guys were hearing about it, you might get scared. And this is a not be scared story. Let me also reset. I am John Aravosis. You are watching the Aravosis Report. This is my daily update on what's been going on in Ukraine in the last 24 hours, give you sort of my take on it. And then when I'm done with the news, we will do a question and answer period till around 7 o'clock. And if I go too long with the news, I'll go after 7 o'clock Eastern, excuse me. So sort of for the next half hour plus. And please do follow me on TikTok and elsewhere. And please do continue with the gifts, because those gifts help support my work. And I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. So the U.S. has accelerated the fielding of more accurate version of its mainstay nuclear bomb to NATO bases in Europe. In other words, the U.S. is upgrading its nuclear weapons in Europe. And some folks were kind of panicking about that. Like, oh my God, does that mean NATO thinks we are going to war? Right. And I think what's going on here, I will say this, okay? We are not increasing the number of nuclear bombs in Europe. Okay, that is not happening. What is happening is we long had a plan, the US military, to upgrade the bombs we have, to modernize them and to make them more safe as well. Okay, so we had a plan to upgrade them. The new weapons were coming in next year, and the old weapons would be taken back to the US. And what's happening is the US military has accelerated that so that the new weapons are going in soon, if not already. Now, the issue is, exactly, the upgrade was happening for a while. The issue, though, is that it looks like it was accelerated. And clearly in these times, thank you, I created for the Aflac Duck. In these times, any talk of the US accelerating nuclear weapon use or nuclear weapon deployment is scary, right? And it certainly risks pissing the Russians off. So I do think that's true. I also think that typically I wouldn't think Biden would do that. What some of the experts think, and I think this is probably more true, is that the U.S. is doing this to try to assuage the concerns of some of our NATO allies. I'm suspecting, especially the Baltic states and especially Poland, that the U.S. is upgrading its weapons early as a sign that, we are there for you. We are never going to let, in other words, because think about it, right? The whole point of the NATO and the U.S. nuclear threat, and in terms of NATO, it's U.S., Britain, and France are the three that have nukes, okay? The whole point of it is A, so that we never have to use them, and B, that Russia knows if they invade NATO, we will use them, right? So the point here is to convince Russia not to invade NATO countries. Thank you for the heart there. Red or Rod, was it Rod? The NATO countries that are going to be invaded first, most likely, right, are going to be, thank you, Skywitch, are going to be, somebody else too, Bonnie, thank you, Bonnie, are going to be Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Most likely they're going to be the first ones invaded because they're right there, right? Now, sure, it's possible the Russians would invade through, thank you, Rod, would invade through Ukraine, and they could still go into Hungary, they could go into Romania, Slovakia, so they could hit a lot of other NATO countries. But the point here, I think, is we upgraded our nukes early because we, thank you, Rod, we upgraded our nukes early because we wanted to make clear to those NATO countries that we take our nuclear deterrent seriously. We absolutely will use that deterrent to protect you. Thank you, Big Drama. That we will use this deterrent to protect you, and we're upgrading it to make that clear to you. That's my sense. Will it also piss the Russians off and scare them a little? Yeah. And my guess is Biden took that into account and probably said, you know what? It's not a deal breaker for me if it scares the Russians, scares the Russian leadership a little bit into thinking, okay, Biden's taking this seriously. Zelensky said today that Russia does not have plans to withdraw from Kherson, which is pretty much what we've always assumed. So getting to sort of the battle that's been going on. As you guys know, the big battle areas have been here in northern Kherson province, also specifically north of the Dnipro River, all around here, but really the big prize is the town of Kherson. The province is called Kherson, and the capital is also called Kherson. That's typical for Ukrainian regions, oblasts, right? Zaporizhia Oblast, Zaporizhia town. Kherson Oblast, Kherson town. Kharkiv Oblast, Kharkiv town, right? So Kherson is the city there, and the Russians have been the Ukrainians are having a lot of success in the area, slow, but good success, and they've been pushing the Russians back. There was some thought that the Russians were going to evacuate all that area north of the river. But now a lot of the experts and the Ukrainians themselves are saying they think the Russians are going to dig in, that they're basically moving the citizens out and looting. Also, they looted a bunch of fire engines. Crazy stuff that they stole. They just stole the fire engines and drove them south, like crazy stuff. But that the troops are not going to pull out. They're going to wait to fight. Let's talk about negotiations a little. There really wasn't a lot of news update on the war front today. Institute for the Study of War. I'm not going to go too much longer because there was a lot of news today, but this is the important stuff. Institute for the Study of War is a very good defense think tank here in the U.S., here in Washington. And they did an analysis today that they do not think Putin has any intention of negotiating with Ukraine, even though he's been talking a lot in the last week about negotiating with Ukraine. Things are not going well for Putin. At home, I think, or in the military. And it is not thought that he wants to negotiate, but he wants to look like he is negotiating. So he wants to look like, I tried to negotiate with Ukraine, but they won't listen, right? So he's been talking about it a lot. ISW thinks that Putin has no intention. I'm going to quote them here. Russian President Vladimir Putin's rhetoric indicates that he is not interested in negotiating seriously with Ukraine and retains maximalist objectives for Ukraine. Maximalist meaning he's got sort of his maximum plans for Ukraine are still on the table, meaning taking the entire country. Putin stated that Ukraine has lost sovereignty in a meeting with the Commonwealth of Independent States on October 26th. Putin stated that the United States is using Ukraine as a battering ram against Russia. The Russian State Duma speaker said that Ukraine has lost the ability to exist as a state. Ukraine is occupied by NATO. Thank you, Sig. Is occupied, and Ukraine has become a colony of the U.S. He said this just yesterday. ISW says this language is incompatible with negotiations on an equal basis for a ceasefire, let alone a resolution to the conflict that Russia began. It instead strongly suggests that the Kremlin still seeks a military victory in Ukraine and regime change in Kyiv. Regime change meaning they want to overthrow the Zelensky government and put a puppet government, a government that is controlled by Moscow instead. Next story. Russia is expected, this was also from ISW, Russia is expected to deploy most of the new conscripts, the new 200,000 troops. Remember, they talked about 300,000. Now it looks like they've got 200. The new guys who aren't getting any training, basically, Russia's expected to finish deploying them in the next 2 weeks, and they will be deployed at the front lines, but also in back areas as well. Okay, the drink. My sister, Greg, I'm laughing because I see a message from Greg on YouTube, Greg Monroe, saying, Daniel, when John shows a map, we post a drink emoji. My sister told me about this, that people were doing a drink because I've got my t-shirt map, that she says they're doing some kind of a drinking game based on your t-shirt map. Which was very fun, which I did not know. I hadn't seen the emoji, but she told me. It was very funny. Russia is still conscripting convicts. I mentioned that to you. You know, I'm gonna skip the rest of the news. Thank you. I did see the heart bullseye on TikTok. Let me just give you a quick little. Ukrainian military is increasing the number of troops along the Belarusian border, which is something that I was afraid they would have to do. We still do not think that Belarus is going to invade Ukraine, but because they keep talking about, because they keep looking like they're gonna, the Ukrainians have to be safe and move troops up there. And the idea, I will show you this on my map, the idea of moving, of Belarus causing trouble up here. This is where Belarus is. This is Russia over here. So the idea of Belarus making, in essence, threats to invade is to force the Ukrainians to move troops up here. Because if you're worried these guys, even if it's a small chance, if you're worried about these guys invading, you're going to put troops here just to defend yourself, just in case. Well, what happens? These are troops that could have been used at the front here and at the front here. The two biggest fronts are here and here. You don't want your troops over here if the biggest fronts are here and here, right? So by Ukraine having to increase the number of troops over here, the Belarusians and the Russians have sufficiently or succeeded in weakening Ukraine, because obviously they would have had the troops to fight the Russians elsewhere. So it's all a con. Last thing, Ukraine's accusing Russia of some kind of illegal construction at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. We don't know what, but the Russians are building something. This is right after the Ukrainians accused the Russians of going into a secure area where the old fuel, the spent fuel rods that are still nuclear from the reactor were stored, and the Russians were in there, and it wasn't clear why. And the Ukrainians and the world were kind of wondering, is this part of the Russians trying to steal the material for a dirty bomb or what? We don't know. And then the final point is the CIA director, America's CIA director, made a surprise visit to Ukraine yesterday and met with Zelensky, among other officials. I thought that was very interesting. Thank you, Red Eye. The CIA director isn't going to Ukraine for vacation. He's going for a reason. And I don't know what that reason is, but I'm intrigued. It certainly suggests that there is CIA work going on, or of some kind, whether, or at the very least, whether the CIA work is going on in country, or whether it's the CIA is doing a lot of work with Ukraine. But clearly, it suggests that there's a lot of activity with the CIA if the director goes over. And frankly, it helps anyway, because it always helps when you have the personal connections. So the fact of the CIA director meeting Zelensky, they know each other now, him meeting the top staff. I don't know if they knew each other before, but it's very helpful if they do. All right, guys, let's switch to the question and answer period. As you know, I'm John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report, my daily show where I update you on what's going on in Ukraine in the past 24 hours, every day at 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday. And please do follow me on TikTok and follow me on YouTube. That helps a lot. And the gifts continue to help on TikTok, and the super chat gifts as well to help me do my work. So thank you, or to help me keep doing my work. So yeah, let's go to the questions. What I'll do is on TikTok for questions, make sure you submit them in the Q&A function. I will say this, for the subscribers on TikTok, the folks who do the TikTok's new subscriber function where you can pay like $6 a month, I will answer your questions first if you pose them. So please do, if you would. Actually, I would say, thank you, Annie. If you can pose them here in the chat itself, because I can push a little button and this will show me the most recent comments from just subscribers. So if you guys would, I'm not seeing anything right there, but if you've got questions, post them there. Sky Queen, I see you've got one over on YouTube. Thank you, by the way, for that. That was generous of you. Why does Russia keep bothering to lie to the West? Are any of their lies actually convincing anyone? That's a good question. Fairly sure those of us with brains will never believe their lies. It is thought that, depending on the lie, okay, a lot of these lies, oh, thank you, Dark Phoenix. That's another one I haven't seen before. You guys are great today. Thank you. It is thought that a lot of the lies that the Russians are putting out there, Putin and the Russian media, are geared to the Russian people themselves. Thank you, Dawn. Yet another one I haven't seen, are geared to the Russian people themselves. Because actually, you know what? This was a point I was making before, and I didn't even finish my thought. I think I went on to a different tangent. The Russian people are now, this war is theirs now. I mean, early on, it was, 150,000 or 200,000 Russian troops at the front, and most Russians weren't worried about it. Some Russians were losing their kids, but it wasn't, and certainly it wasn't Moscow. It was not happening in Moscow, right? Now, it's affecting a lot more. Thank you, Dark Phoenix. It's affecting a lot more. You are seeing, because they drafted another 200,000 men or conscripted another 200,000 men, they forced 750,000 men or more to flee the country so they wouldn't get drafted, right? That takes you to 1 million families plus that are somehow affected by this war. Either they're affected because their child, their husband, their son, right, whoever has been forced to flee the country, so you're worried about that, right? Or they're affected because their loved one has been injured, and frankly, really injured. It's the stuff that comes back from war is scary. I remember here in Washington, D.C., it would have been in the 2010s. So it would have been like 8 years ago to 10 years ago. I remember seeing all sorts of people, actually then, but also the late 2000s, lots of young white men in DC who were very, I don't want to say yuppie, but, well put together young guys, professional, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, like professional working guys without an arm, without their legs, and things that I have rarely seen in DC, rarely seen this, and seeing it all the freaking time, especially in the last 10 years. That, I guarantee you, is because of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's U.S. soldiers and that lost their limbs fighting there. The Russians, I am convinced, are seeing the same thing. And it's the kind of thing where when you're seeing it on your block, and then you hear about your relative, and you hear about your friend down the block, and then it happens in your own family, and you are seeing now that this war is starting to touch a lot of everyday Russians that weren't touched before, and we are seeing it affect a lot of people in Moscow and St. Petersburg now, because initially, and Putin's still doing it to a degree, but initially, what Putin did was, which is really kind of scummy, he went after the ethnic minorities first. That was the really obnoxious thing first. They went and they took a lot of the, oops, there we go. I was trying to put that live. They went and I just got distracted because Elise just said, it's my birthday today and very weird to be 67. Don't think I'm feeble yet, but I'd be the last to know. So I just wanted to mention it's Elise's birthday, who is always submitting good questions and always supporting my work. So everybody give her a little. Actually, that's right. My promise is that I sing happy birthday when it happens. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Elise. Happy birthday to you. There we go. And you're getting, thank you for the hat. And you're getting birthday wishes on TikTok as well, just so you know. And now, and as I do that, I will always forget my chain of thought when I do that. Always. All right, let me go on with more questions here. Are chances of a Russian dirty bomb or nuke up or down? I think the chances are, anyway, yeah. So I think a lot of the Russian lies are lying to their own people was my point, because their people are freaking out. And some of it, the last little point, thank you, Heather there. And wait, sorry, who gave the, I was trying to see really quick. So who gave the little hat and mustache? Neil. Thank you, Neil. That was nice of you. I appreciate that. They're also trying to freak out the far right, sort of the MAGA right, Fox News, Trump, because Trump is pretty much anti-Ukraine, pro-Putin. Certainly the war. Trump's been very negative on the war recently. And thank you, Cammie. And they're now trying to also bolster the far left because it's been fringe until now. Thank you, Annie. It's been fringe until now, but the far left in our country has also been, anti-Ukraine, claiming Ukraine's, NZs and this kind of stuff. Thank you, Neil. And now that we had the members of Congress, these 30 liberal members of Congress signed that crazy letter that went out this week, it gives more motivation to Putin to say, you know what? Maybe there are some divisions. Maybe it's only beginning, but there's some divisions in America. I'm going to stoke them. I'm going to try to make them, make the cleavages more, right? So there you go. All right, let me beep. Let me see. Just making sure I didn't sort of miss any of those. Oh, that's what we're saying. So any chance of a Russian dirty bomb or nuke up or down? There's certainly a greater chance of a Russian dirty bomb than a Russian nuke, because the nuke they really know. And part of this is, I think, the perception, because let's face it. I'd be more freaked out of a nuclear bomb going off in downtown DC would freak me out a lot more than a dirty bomb. A dirty bomb would still freak me out, right? That would really bother me for sure. But it wouldn't bother me nearly as much. Thank you, Ahuva. It wouldn't bother me nearly as much as a nuke. If a nuke went out in Washington, D.C., I'd leave town. I would absolutely leave town. If a dirty bomb went off, I wouldn't be happy. I'm not sure I'd leave town. I might. A nuke, forget it. I'm moving to the country. There's no way in hell I'd stay here if a nuke went off. And that's why I think it is much more likely Russia would use a dirty bomb, because the U.S. and NATO response will probably be less to a dirty bomb than it would be to a nuclear bomb. That's my guess. But in any case, so I think the nuclear risk is still low. I think the dirty risk is higher because everybody in the Russian government, including Putin, keeps talking about it, which certainly means they're trying to freak us out, but it might also mean they're thinking about it. Thank you, K. Templar, for that. Danielle, good to see you. How long will American support to Ukraine last if U.S. midterms swing Republican? That's the question that always causes trouble. I suppose limited aid to Ukraine, as some MAGA candidates are pro-Putin, and because cost of living, crisis, inflation. That's been very interesting. Oh, did you? Yeah, I'm wearing sorry, people were noticing. I'm wearing my T-shirt that is in my store. It shows up better here. Here it's kind of a little. Thank you, Flower Lady. It's not showing up as well on YouTube. It's reflecting too much. But for you guys, I can tell it's showing up well. Drawn by a Ukrainian kid, which is neat. A Ukrainian school kid. Very cool. And it's at store.aravosis.com. So store.aravosis.com. You can go check it out. It's very cool. But I love the shirt. It's and it ends up printing nicely. I'm only doing this because somebody mentioned the shirt. So what had happened a week ago, or a week or so ago, Kevin McCarthy is the Republican leader of the U.S. House. He is the Speaker of the House, is the top official of the majority party. The majority party right now is Democrat. The majority party in a week and a half could very well be Republican. The polls right now suggest the Republicans could win, right? Thank you, Sam I am, for that. Suggest that the Republicans could win. The polls right now suggest they will win, but a lot can happen in 10 days. So McCarthy's been getting more interviews from people, and he interviewed with Punchbowl News, which is actually a respectable publication, respectable journalists here in DC, and said that there would be no more blank checks to Ukraine. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of the MAGA folks, not all, but a lot of the real MAGA folks, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, like the real Trumpy people, not just the folks who support him, because lots of Republicans support Trump, but the real MAGA people, they don't like Ukraine because Trump doesn't like Ukraine. And Trump is very pro-Putin, and they're pro-Putin. So the concern is that Kevin McCarthy was expressing this negativity towards supporting Ukraine because he wants to be Speaker of the House. And in order to do that, just like in UK politics or elsewhere, it's your caucus. It's your fellow elected officials who vote to pick the party leader. And for him to be the leader in the House, he's got to get the votes of all the MAGA people, or at least a lot of them, right? So he had said this. It convinced a lot of people that this means Ukrainian aid would be in danger if the Republicans win the House. A lot of senior Republicans in Congress, apparently in the House, went to McCarthy and ripped his head off and said, "You've got to be kidding me. That's not happening. you better keep supporting Ukraine." And McCarthy backed off and said, no. I'm not saying we're not going to support them. I'm just saying it's going to be Biden's going to be responsible for pushing it. So all of a sudden, McCarthy's backing off now. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it is certainly safer for Ukraine to get the money if Democrats are in power than Republicans, because the Democratic fringe is very fringy right now. We saw it in the U.S. House, right? 30 members of Congress out of 220 or so House members, 230 Democrats among around 220 Democrats or so in the House were kind of being anti-Ukraine, to be honest, and pro, pacifism. And they got shot down immediately. I mean, like, seriously got in trouble. Like, they had to rescind that letter. They basically, for anybody who doesn't know, they wrote this letter. It was issued about a week ago, maybe even 5 days ago, caused a firestorm because it was a letter kind of demanding that Biden force negotiations. And right now, forcing negotiations would only help Russia. It would hurt Ukraine because Ukraine is finally on the offensive. It would be a disaster for Ukraine. And people destroyed, left and right, people destroyed them to the point where the next day, those 30 members of Congress withdrew the letter and said, "Okay, we're sorry. It was a mistake." So the good thing is, on the left, it is still a fringe view that not helping Ukraine. On the right, I will say, it is still a fringe view, but the problem you get on the right among Republicans is Donald Trump, okay? On the left, we don't have any of our party leaders. I'll say we, the left in general doesn't have any of the party leaders who are saying, no, we've got to have peace talks. This war, NATO started it. You're not hearing that kind of stuff, right? NATO started it. Ukraine's to blame. Ukraine is a state run by NZs, right? You're not hearing that kind of stuff from any of the leaders on the left. You're hearing it from some lefty members of Congress, but not the leaders. On the right, you're hearing it from Trump, and it's fed down to Fox News. So you're hearing it from Fox News as well, Tucker Carlson in particular. So that makes it a little more dangerous on the right because it's more powerful people who are putting out the message, basically. So it's going to be riskier having Republicans running the House. Republicans in the Senate, much more supportive. Not all of them, though, and one man in the Senate can still cause a lot of damage because it worked the way it's set up. But yeah, and the other thing is, I will say this, as far as the economy, it could be a problem because what you've got is the message Trump is putting out there and some of the other Republicans. But again, most Republicans are still being supportive, not as supportive of Democrats, but they're still very supportive of the war, which is good and important. But you're seeing Trump, for example, talk about how, the economy's getting worse, inflation, we should be spending the money at home. It's this sort of isolationist talk. Now, if we were spending the money at home, of course, inflation would be worse. So there's that. Also, Democrats wanted to spend $3 trillion with a T on infrastructure, and the Republicans in Congress killed the bill. So Democrats wanted to spend the money at home and Republicans wouldn't do it. So, but nonetheless, in politics, it doesn't matter what's true or what's false. What matters is how your message resonates. And I think for a lot of voters and a lot of Americans, especially if the recession happens, they're going to say, I'm hurting and my government's sending money to them. It's an argument that even if it doesn't really, it's not based in truth. You're not hurting because the government's sending money abroad. And if the government didn't send the money abroad, they wouldn't be spending more on you. But it sounds good. So anyway, that was a long answer to Daniel's question. And yes, moderators, you are, as always, doing God's work there. Let me go into my TikTok general questions for the other TikTokers. Hang on a second here. Let me check here. Oops, sorry. My sister is texting me just to let me know how generous it was of you to do that. So the TikTok shuttle. So thank you again. That was The Midwesterner in me wants to say it was too much, but I do appreciate it. So thank you. The questions, Q&A on TikTok. Here we go. Oh, just to remind folks, I am John Aravosis. You are listening to the Aravosis Report. I am here to talk about Ukraine to you, the news of the last 24 hours, and to give you my take on it. And right now we're in the question and answer period where I take your questions and we talk about it. So let me see. And please do follow me on TikTok and follow me on YouTube and everywhere else. So do you think if Putin is going to lose or die, he will take down everything along with him with tactical nukes? I don't think so. I don't think so. And here's why, okay? First of all, I always say Putin's crazy, but he's not crazy. I mean, he's a jerk, but he's not crazy. You know, he's not Gaddafi or something. I mean, he's just not crazy. Second of all, Putin sees himself as Peter the Great. I am not a great Russian history expert, but I did Google Peter the Great to sort of see what Putin was talking about. Marianne, thank you for that. I did sort of Google just to see what Putin was talking about. And the whole issue with Peter the Great was Peter the Great went and I guess among other things, he basically stole land from Scandinavia and was able to create St. Petersburg in the north. He was able to expand Russia, right? Thank you, Cami. To expand greater Russia. So to help the empire grow, right? So I think if you think of Putin, that kind of makes sense, right? Putin seems to be also with this idea of the empire. He's upset that the Soviet Union dissolved, that Mikhail Gorbachev helped the Soviet Union basically fall apart and into its component states, right? Soviet Union was made up of like 15 different countries. Actually, Marion, help me on this. I keep forgetting to Google. The Soviet Union was 15 republics, was it not? But you basically had 15 countries that got eaten up into one group and pretty much oppressed by all the Russians. But you had Ukraine was a member, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, right? Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all these countries today and countries before that got eaten up by the Russians, really. It was the Russian Revolution and the Soviets themselves, okay? So Putin looks at that and says, it's a disaster that the Soviet Union was dissolved. We lost our empire. We lost our greatness, and I'm going to get it back. And one of the ways, maybe the most important way he's going to get it back is by going and taking Ukraine and making Ukraine part of Russia, right? And remember, he's already taken Crimea. Crimea is the peninsula in the south. And Crimea, the Russians invaded and stole in 2014, saying it's always Russian, blah, 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 this kind of garbage. He wants to take the rest of Ukraine. Now, that's because he wants to be remembered as the guy who made Russia great again. I mean, I'm not intentionally trying to compare it with Trump at all, but I mean, literally, that's it. Russia isn't great anymore. We were a great power when we were the Soviet Union. The world feared us. We were a nuclear power. Think about that too. We were a nuclear power. The world feared our weapons. Well, the world hasn't feared Russian nuclear weapons for 31 years. This year, the world is fearing Russian nuclear weapons again. I mean, that to me, that's a whole other reason of why Putin is doing what he's doing about nukes. He's just trying to remind the world we have nukes and you should, right? It's a spoiled kid, really. I have nukes too. I mean, there's a great cartoon that I've got. I'll never find this now. I had it. I saved it the other day. I'm going to look really quick. It's a great little cartoon people have been sharing about Putin. Let me look real quick. 1 second here. Oh, I did find it. I've got it right here. This is funny. Here, I'll show you guys. It's Putin doing show and tell in school. Now, for any of you who aren't American, you may have the same thing. Show and tell is when you're supposed to, usually when you're like 4, 5, or 6 years old, and you bring something to school and you show it to the class, and then you explain, and then you tell them what it is. So this is Putin bringing his nuclear weapon, and the teachers, and he goes, "This is a nuclear weapon." And the teacher goes, "Vladimir, this is the 9th week in a row you've shown a nuclear weapon in class." He wants to make Russia great again. He doesn't do that by starting a nuclear war that would kill millions, I mean, more than millions, tens of millions of Russians, and destroy the country. So I think even if he's pushed out of office, he doesn't want to start a nuclear war, because it's bad enough he got pushed out of office, but he can at least try to fight the historical war and say, look what I did in 20 years in leadership in this country. I did blah, blah, blah. But I was leader for 20 years, and then when I got pushed out, I killed 95% of Russia's population by starting a nuclear war. The history books are going to be really bad to you in Russia if you do that. So I don't see it. I just don't see him. I don't see him starting a nuclear war. I mean, again, he could by accident, but again, if he becomes desperate, the problem is, no, it's a fair point. Jay is saying, what if he becomes desperate? The thing is, if he becomes desperate, he still is going to, in his head, go, okay, I'm desperate. Mind you, define desperation. Is desperation I'm losing the war? Is desperation I'm about to lose my job? Right? I don't know. But no matter what it is, he has to then think and say, okay, I'm about to lose the war, or I'm about to lose my job. I need to figure out quickly how to save the war, how to save my job, how to get myself a better job, how to keep myself alive. Does starting a nuclear war do that? That's my question. Is any of these concerns of he's desperate, okay, but then why does using a nuke somehow solve his desperation? How does it logically in his head make him go, but if I use a nuke, I can save my job? Really? I'm not sure that's true. Thank you, Jay Marie. I would think if he uses a nuke, he also runs the risk of other Russian leaders, the military and the Secret Service and everybody else, Secret Service, the security services, the FSB, saying, no way. No way. You're going to start a nuclear war. You're out of here. Right. So anyway, that's sort of the point. I mean, I'll do another question or two, but the point I'll leave you with whenever you're worrying about nuclear war is to think, okay, unless he's just BS crazy, right? There has to be a reason that Putin would use a nuke, a calculated, logical reason. So what is his logical reason? How does using a nuke achieve a goal that Putin wants? It's not enough to say he's losing and it's not enough to say what the Russians are saying. If you touch Crimea, that's Russian territory and you've attacked the Russian mainland and we're going to nuke you. That's not, no. If the Ukrainians attack Crimea and it's not Russia, but let's pretend it's Russia. How does using a nuke leave Russia in a better situation after they use a nuke? It doesn't, because using a nuke will force NATO to enter the war, and then it's a guarantee that Russia is going to lose Crimea and everything else. So again, always, every time you get scared about nukes, ask yourself, okay, logically, how would this help? But if he's dying, here's the same problem. Sarsa is saying, what if he's dying? If he's dying, Putin has already said publicly he wants to be Peter the Great. He wants to be the guy who made Russia great again. He does not make Russia great again by pushing the nuclear button and starting a war that kills 95% of Russians. It doesn't make Russia great again. It makes him remembered as the guy who killed tens of millions of Russians by doing something that didn't help Russia at all. That's, again, I don't think he's crazy. I think he's a jerk. I don't think he's crazy, right? Big difference. All right. One or two more questions, guys, and then we're going to call it quits. This has been good tonight. I mean, you guys have been incredibly generous, but it's been a good show. I feel like it's been a good show too. Yeah, but I mean, if I can't have you, nobody can. But I think that's Ashley is saying, if Putin has if I can't have you, nobody can mentality, a nuke makes sense if he's desperate. But the thing is, my dog, Sasha, you got to wait. Sasha's making the noises she makes when she's, my dog goes to her bed, and when she can't get the cover over her head correctly, she goes, "Rrr, rrr." Sasha, you got to wait. You got to wait. I'm sorry. You got to wait, Sasha. She's making noise. I'll go to her in a second. In any case, yeah, no, I think once again, he wants to be remembered as a great leader of Russia. He doesn't do that by saying, if I can't have it, nobody can, I'm going to nuke everything. It makes him look horrible. It makes him look horrible. Who succeeds Putin? That's the problem. I was reading something on this actually just yesterday. Lots of concern of all the guys that might be following Putin are just as bad, if not worse than him. Did you hear it that time? Well, it's funny because with this mic, you won't necessarily hear it a lot because this is a very good sort of, not even directional mic. It's professional mic so that it picks up my voice, but you won't hear fans and you won't hear other things, but you will occasionally hear my dog. Empty history buff, who always has interesting comments. I could see Putin salting the earth, so to speak, and leaving everything in ruin or polluted in their wake. I really disagree. I mean, okay, I could see him doing it out of spite, sure. But I still think, God, I mean, I still think he's going to sit there and say, how does this affect my legacy? Right? I'm just not convinced it's gonna, I don't know. I mean, maybe he'd be that spiteful, but he's still going to think of he's an egomaniac. He's going to think of his legacy, and his legacy is going to be, you started a nuclear war. And I'm sorry, not even that. Let's pretend it doesn't start a nuclear war. Let's pretend Putin uses a tactical nuke, one of the small nukes in Ukraine. The result, I mean, if I were advising him, I'd be like, okay, you get pissed, you could decide to go scorched earth, and you say, I'm going to drop a nuke and hurt Ukraine anyway because they made me mad. And I'm leaving, it's like taking the chessboard and throwing it in the air, right? The problem is, I'd say, okay, here's the next thing that's going to happen. You're going to use a nuke in Ukraine. NATO is going to get involved in the war. They might declare war on us, but at the very least, they're going to join the war. They're going to probably destroy our naval base in Sevastopol in Crimea. At the very least, they're going to put a no-fly zone in place, and they're going to destroy our Air Force, our defensive radar, surface-to-air missiles, and our troops on the ground. And they're going to then make it possible for the Ukrainians to control all the skies in Ukraine and bomb our troops at will. And literally, within a couple months, the Ukrainians are going to get their entire country back. And the 200,000 new troops that we're sending over are going to get killed, all because you decided to go all scorched earth. So right now, the war could be a tie. Thank you, Inspired Woman, for that. Right now, the war could be a tie that Russia's slowly losing. If you use a nuke, NATO's entering, and it's no longer a tie. You're going to lose that war like that, right? Because as I've said, Russia's not doing very well against NATO. Imagine what's going to happen if Russia has to fight against Russia's not doing well against Ukraine. Imagine if you add 30 plus 2 soon, NATO, 2 shortly, NATO countries against them. Yes, I did see the Reuters thing. I didn't even get to the Reuters thing tonight. There's too much there. All right, guys, I'm going to call it quits. All right. Thank you for joining. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern again. We'll be doing the same thing. I'll be summarizing sort of the latest news from Ukraine, sort of picking the best stories that I think matter, the most important, telling you why they matter. And then we'll do about half an hour, same like we did today, of just questions and all of that, taking your questions, and we'll go from there. Other than that, like I said, yeah. So I'm wearing one of my T-shirts today that I did that I'm selling in my store. Well, actually, it is looking a little better there now. But designed by a Ukrainian kid. Actually, these Ukrainian kids we got drawings from these Ukrainian kids. I will do the recap. Got permission to create T-shirts out of them, and thank you, Wanda. And from every sale, I am basically selling the T-shirts to do a joint fundraiser to support my work, 50%, and 50% goes to all the humanitarian work we've been doing in Ukraine. I've raised with your guys' help, raised it from you guys, $70,000 at this point. That is all gone to Ukraine. And of that of the 70,000, I didn't take a dime. We raised 70,000 that went to Ukraine, and almost every one of those fundraisers was 100% to Ukraine. Only with the T-shirt sales am I trying to now do 50-50 so I can get some support for my work as well. All right, let me do the quick summary here. So what I do at the end of the show, just to remind folks, then is I just recap the stories and give you basically the main headline of each story that I talked about tonight, just in case you missed any of it. So at least you go, okay, those are the top stories today. So here we go. The one I started just to be fun, not to be funny. I wanted to start with something that wasn't as serious, but this is a true story. A Russian comedy network, so a comedy television network, has shut down, thank you, Kevin, has shut down all of its comedy shows because most of Russia's comedians have left the country as a result of the war. Putin kind of flinched on nuking Ukraine today in a speech, but I titled this section, "But he's also a liar." Putin gave a speech today talking about how, it would not make sense politically or militarily for us to nuke Russia, to nuke Ukraine. So of course we're not going to do it. But then he went on to talk about how he still thinks Ukraine is going to use a dirty bomb. And the concern about a dirty bomb, which is a conventional bomb with a nuclear material attached to it, is that the experts are afraid, people in the West, that Putin's talking about a dirty bomb because he's going to blow up a dirty bomb, blame Ukraine, and then use that as an excuse to use a nuclear bomb. So, his denial. Putin then went on to claim that the West is blinded by colonialism and that we're trying to contain the development of other civilizations by stopping Russia from eradicating Ukraine from the map. The U.S. has accelerated the fielding of a more accurate version of its mainstay nuclear bomb in Europe. We are not increasing the number of nuclear bombs we have in Europe, but we are updating the ones we've got, taking the old ones back, bringing new ones in, and we've updated the times. We've made the timetable quicker. That's not quite English. We're doing it more quickly than we had planned. Zelensky said today that Russia does not plan to withdraw from the town of Kherson itself. They're staying put to prepare for a fight. Institute for the Study of War says that Putin has no intention of negotiating, and we went through a lot of different data points talking about why it's clear that even though Putin is talking about negotiations, he doesn't mean it. Russia is expected to deploy most of its new conscripts within the next 2 weeks. These are the 200,000 plus new men that Russia brought into the war, but isn't training, right? So there's that. But they're expected to be at the front lines and elsewhere in the next 2 weeks. There you go. Russia is still conscripting convicts. So they're going to prisons basically and telling the prisoners, if you fight for us, we'll expunge your record. Oh, I didn't tell you. According to reports, those agreeing to participate in the war have been convicted of murder, rape, and selling drugs. So I forgot to mention that. So honestly, if I were in the military, I'd be a little freaked out that the guy next to me might have been guilty of those crimes. This is what a desperate military does, because you're not going to have great morale and cohesion in that military. A Reuters investigation of a document trove, I didn't really get to this, but of a document trove found in an abandoned Russian command post in eastern Ukraine near Kharkiv, supported Institute for the Study of War's longstanding assessments about the poor condition of Russian forces. Basically, it found that their units and their battalions, the strength was horrific. 19%, 23% strength of these units. Morale was poor. Commanding officers were jerks. You get it. Ukrainian military says it's increased the number of forces along the Belarusian border just in case. Ukraine accuses Russia of illegal construction at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, but they don't know what it is, what the Russians are constructing, but it's something kind of, they're worried about it. Longer power cutoffs are going to be introduced in Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. This was a story I didn't get to mention, but I'll give you the quick synopsis. The Russian attacks have left only 600 to 800 megawatt capacity for the capital, which usually consumes 1,000 to 1,200 megawatts, meaning you're talking 40% to 40 to 50% or so of the energy. Well, 40%, 30 to 40% of the energy has been destroyed that's available to the capital. And finally, the U.S. CIA director did a surprise visit to Ukraine yesterday, met with Zelensky and a number of other folks. All right, guys, let's take a break. We'll take a break till tomorrow. I will be back at 6 p.m. Eastern. Please do come back tomorrow. Join us again. Same show, same time. I will be here on TikTok and YouTube and everywhere else. And once again, I will do about half an hour summarizing the news, and then we'll do questions and answers. I'm not going to go do Discord tonight because I can feel my throat's a little tight tonight. I've been I have a Discord, by the way, too, discord.aravosis.com. It's free. So you guys can go there. I've got very cool auction item right now that you can check out over there. But I do have a Discord, discord.aravosis.com, that you can check out as well. We've got almost 900 people who signed up for or maybe we've got 900 now who signed up for the Discord, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you guys for that as well. And finally, yes, thank you, moderators. I do note, I keep an eye. I try not to read too many of the comments as I'm speaking, because as I'm reading the news or summarizing the news, it throws me when I read the comments, but I can tell I can see all of a sudden muted. So I can see the moderators are like, da, 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 da. So yes, we do. As always, we get a lot of Russian trolls, unfortunately. So the mods have been amazing. So thank you guys for that as well. All right, guys, I'm going to call it quits. I'm going to throw a blanket on my dog, and we'll be back tomorrow. And again, remember, Monday show, 6 p.m. on, I'm here tomorrow, but 6 p.m. on Eastern Time, US on Monday, I'm going to be doing a special show with my guest friend, Cliff Schechter, who is a polling expert. And Cliff is going to talk to us about the latest polling and where things stand in all the races across the country, because we've got an election coming up here Tuesday, November 28th. So Monday will be 8 days before the election. Cliff's great. I'm not going to go to Discord tonight just because my voice is a little stressed. I mean, it's not bad, but I can tell it's a little, and I don't want to I was there last night for about 20, 25 minutes. So I'll come tomorrow again. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Love you all. See you guys tomorrow.